In the chaos of World War II, while generals plotted invasions and ideologues spewed hatred across Europe, there were men who operated quietly. Men whose names were never shouted in speeches or printed in bold on Nazi propaganda. Men like Dr. Fritz Hintermayer, whose work didn't take place on battlefields, but behind stone walls and iron bars. His job was not to wage war, but to supervise death. Born in 1909 in Austria, Hintermayer pursued medicine, a profession associated with healing, compassion, and the preservation of life. By the time he completed his studies, the political winds had shifted. Hitler's ideology was gaining traction, and with the Anschluss of Austria in 1938, the Nazi regime absorbed Austrian institutions into its growing machinery. It was in this new order that Dr. Hintermayer aligned himself. He joined the SS and became a part of something far greater and darker than any hospital ward. Assigned as a prison doctor at Berlin-Plötzensee, one of the Nazi regime's most infamous execution sites, Hintermayer's role strayed far from the Hippocratic Oath. The prison was a place of silence, terror, and routine extermination. Thousands of political prisoners, resistance members, and civilians deemed threats to the Reich were brought there. Many after sham trials, or none at all. They were sentenced to death, and Hintermayer was there to ensure it was carried out properly. He did not pull the lever. He did not tie the noose. But he was always present. When prisoners were lined up before the guillotine or the scaffold, it was Dr. Hintermayer who observed. It was his responsibility to pronounce death, to check the body, and to oversee that everything had gone according to protocol. The presence of a physician gave the executions a sense of order, a perverse ritual masked as state procedure. And yet, his calm demeanor masked complicity. He signed off on death after death. He turned his back on suffering, distancing himself from moral consequence. He never asked why the condemned were there. He never questioned the regime's right to kill. His silence was his service. As the war came to an end in 1945 and the Nazi regime collapsed, the world began to uncover the depth of its crimes. While top Nazi leaders were hunted across Europe, many mid-level functionaries hoped they would go unnoticed. Hintermayer was one of them. He did not flee the country. He did not change his name. Perhaps he believed that, as a doctor, his role had been minor, that his signature and silent supervision would be forgiven or forgotten. But it wasn't. When Allied forces occupied Austria, they began detaining anyone linked to Nazi institutions. Hintermayer's name appeared in prison records. Survivors remembered him. Calm, efficient, always present at executions. He was arrested and charged with war crimes, not for killing with his own hands, but for facilitating the Nazi state's process of murder. His trial was brief but conclusive. Testimonies placed him at hundreds of executions. Documents bore his signature. He offered no compelling defense. He claimed he was only following orders, a refrain heard from so many of his peers. But the world had heard enough of that. The tribunal declared that obedience did not absolve complicity, especially when it came from a man trained to save lives. On March 4, 1946, Dr. Fritz Hintermayer was executed by hanging. Ironically, he faced the same fate he had witnessed so many times before. There were no headlines, no international attention, just one more execution, this time of the man who had stood silently at so many others. No one recorded his final words, if there were any at all. Today, his name is little known. There are no statues, no documentaries. But his story is not insignificant. It reminds us that evil doesn't always come with shouting or blood on one's hands. Sometimes it wears a white coat, nods quietly, and signs the papers.